We will be getting started in 5 minutes after the hour. 5 minutes after the hour, we'll be getting started. Good evening. We will be getting started at 5 minutes after the hour. So if you need to grab something to drink, something to take your notes and thoughts on, please do so now. We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Masonic Seminar Series. My name is Brother Katie Kumsie, and I am the facilitator and moderator of this particular group of Universal Co-Masonry. I want to welcome everybody who is joining us after a long summer vacation of 2 months off, as well as those that are coming in for the first time. I wanted to go over a little bit of ground rules and talk about what we've been doing over the last several months, and then we're going to get started into tonight's presentation, which is on Freemasonry, the Western Esoteric Tradition, and Kabbalah. Universal Co-Masonry is a Masonic organization for men and women that has worked many, many decades to build and establish strong connections throughout the community by doing education of the mind, spirit, and soul. And one of those outreach programs is the Masonic Seminar. This platform is for people who are interested in becoming a Freemason or maybe are curious about what Freemasonry is all about. And it is a lecture style presentation each month. It's an episodic, meaning that every month is different. So if you're joining us for the first time, you're not necessarily going to be left behind because you weren't with us in the first part of the year. That being said, I did choose to do the Western Esoteric Tradition as a theme. So we are finishing up. Today will be the second to last installment. If you wanted to see any other previous presentation on the Western Esoteric Tradition, you can do so by going to our YouTube channel. I would ask either Brother Patrick or Brother Benjamin to throw that into the chat so that you can look at it. Again, tonight's presentation is standalone, so if you haven't seen those, that is fine. And speaking of Brother Benjamin and Brother Patrick, I want to say thank you to them. They are our IT brothers who are helping every month to stream across different platforms, Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, or I guess it would be X and YouTube. So that being said, that's the Masonic Seminar Series. We are here to answer questions and to help give as much information as we can about Freemasonry and its various perspectives and aspects without giving away anything of ritual. We don't want to give that away because that's left up for each person to experience. Typically, I am your presenter and you're stuck with me for an hour and a half, but tonight I do have a guest speaker, which is Brother Casey Collins, who is coming in from Canada, who will be presenting tonight's topic. He is far better an expert than I, so you are in good hands with Brother Casey. He will teach you everything you need to know on an entry level about the Western Esoteric Tradition, Kabbalah, and Freemasonry. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Brother Casey. He may do things a little bit differently, so he may stop more to ask questions. He may talk the entire time, but either way, I hope you enjoy your time here for the next hour and a half at the Masonic Seminar Series. Brother Casey, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Brother Katie. It is not easy to fill in for such an illustrious person. So I apologize if you're used to a particular format and are frequenting Masonic Seminar Series. I apologize for any deficiencies in my delivery. I'm just stepping in with kind of notes and ideas to connect you with Kabbalah and also Kabbalah and its relationship to Freemasonry tonight. I'd like to, kind of keep it informal and open to your questions. So, please feel free at any point to raise a hand and ask a question or type a question to one of the administrators so that I can respond to your question um, and kind of keep us engaged in that way. So basically, I want to introduce tonight a little bit of the history of the Jewish mystical tradition that we call Kabbalah, and then also its conceptual relationship to what we call Freemasonry. The term Kabbalah, mekabel, it means received. So it's a kind of received tradition. And within the Jewish tradition at large, the notion is that outside of the scriptures, there is an oral tradition that has been preserved, handed down, and received by mekabelim, receivers, even today. Okay? Usually rabbis, but could be anybody else as well. could be you and me. Okay, so it's the received tradition. It's a mystical tradition that focuses on different things than other aspects of Jewish religious life. For example, religious jurisprudence, halacha, that discourse of religious law, how to live as a Jew, is sort of a separate, domain of religious scholarship in Judaism. Sometimes kind of at loggerheads with the Kabbalists. They see themselves as engaged in different projects, thinking about different questions. And in a way, that's very similar to the relationship between Freemasonry and the kind of mainstream religious institutions of our time and also of the Enlightenment era Europe, wherein Freemasonry was born. Okay, so there are many resonances, I think, between the positionality of a Kabbalist to mainstream Judaism and between a Freemason and mainstream kind of religiosity. Okay. So there's some related terms. Kabbalah doesn't, the word Kabbalah, meaning what we are taking it to mean, like Jewish mysticism, it doesn't really emerge until the 13th century. So the 1200s people begin using it and saying, I have a Kabbalah book, or I am a Kabbalist, or these ideas are coming from Kabbalah. That word doesn't appear until the 13th century, probably in Spain and Provence. So like not in Southwest Asia, in Palestine, Israel, but in the Mediterranean. Okay? So that's kind of where this word and some of these ideas first actually begin to emerge. But that doesn't mean that mysticism wasn't part of Judaism until the 13th century. Okay, so other words appear in the Torah, in the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, in the Talmud, in Jewish philosophy, all of which are forerunners of the Kabbalistic literary or textual and intellectual tradition. So one of these words is very fundamental to what we do as Freemasons and also for Kabbalah is the word sod. And I'm sorry, this is kind of a last minute presentation. I didn't put together any slides, but maybe I can type some of these words. At least I'll type them just in Romanization, so you can write them down, study them if you want to. Okay, the word sod means secret. Okay. Oh, I think I might have just only sent that to one person. How do I? Everybody. Here we go. Okay, so the word sod means secret. Not sod, it's sod, okay? Sod. Sodot are secrets. Okay, so there are many biblical verses that, like even in Psalms, refer to like the sodot, the secrets of the divine. Um, this word appears throughout Jewish literature. Okay, so there are conceptions of secrecy and religion, that the divine conceals certain matters from humanity, but that we may desire to know them, and we uh, may even have access to them through either devotional practices or religious practices, or through kind of like the grace of the divine bestowing knowledge of these secrets upon us. And what are the secrets? What do they have to do with? There are things like cosmological secrets or astrological secrets, secrets about divination, magic, spiritual realms, various kinds of spiritual realms, or the realm of the divine itself, like the kind of the chariot or the throne of the divine. These are all kind of the secrets, the sodot of God. So if we are thinking about kind of like the genealogy of Kabbalah, um, we might start here. Okay, so this is sort of the ancient term. Now, much later, the Kabbalah is like we would call like a medieval term. Okay, it's coming in the medieval period. and its orientation is slightly different. So rather than, cosmology, astrology, etc., there's more of a focus on theosophy and theurgy. So knowledge or wisdom about God, or even some way of compelling the divine to respond to human activity. These are the focuses of Kabbalah in its earliest medieval iterations. Later, now this is kind of an interesting curiosity, which you will probably run into both if you're interested in Hermetic things, Freemasonry, spiritual things in general, you may run across all kinds of Kabbalah books, and you might notice right away that it's spelled with very little consistency, like sometimes with a Q, a C, a K, different numbers of B's and L's. It's a very bewildering spelling problem. And this is not a hard and fast rule, but here is sort of the breakdown why there are these different spellings. Okay, so Kabbalah, this is, with a K spelled in this way, this is referring to Jewish mysticism. Okay, with a K, if you see this. Usually. Okay. Now, if you see with a Q, okay, oops, see, auto correct is checking this, changing it back to a K. Kabbalah with a Q is more of like the Hermetic mysticism. And later, I'm going to explain how this happened. How did Freemasonry get connected to, adapted by, appropriated by Hermeticists? When did that happen? What were they doing? And really, how did that link Kabbalah and Freemasonry together indelibly? Okay. We'll get there. But for now, let me just point out that if you see Kabbalah with a Q, like on a book title, it's probably referring to a work of Hermetic mysticism. So these might be people who are not Jewish writing. They don't speak Hebrew or Aramaic. They can't read the texts in their original, but they may have learned about some of the ideas, found them to be inspiring or insightful in one way or another, and then written down their reflections in a kind of mystical mode, using some of the language and concepts of Kabbalah applied to Rosicrucianism or something else, okay? Some Hermetic system. And finally, Kabbalah with a C. Oops. Sometimes, not always, but usually is referring to works of Christian mysticism. Okay. So we will meet later on. We will meet some specific Christian Kabbalists, and in their works, they use a different spelling to distinguish their works from Jewish mysticism. Okay. Now, so this, these Q and C layers, Kabbalah, however you want to say them, those are really kind of from the Renaissance and the early modern period. Okay, so if Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism as such, emerged in the medieval period, Hermetic Kabbalah, Christian Kabbalah, they emerged in the Renaissance and the early modern period. 1400s, maybe until like the 1700s. And then when we get to the modern period, maybe from 1750s up until today, we might just use the term Jewish mysticism to refer to kind of like the modern period, if we're looking at like different periodizations here. And again, the orientation is different. Now we're looking at sort of the Jewish mysticism today is really concerned with the internal spiritual experience of the individual. It may be influenced by insights derived from psychology or other disciplines, heavily influence contemporary Jewish mysticism. There's also something in between maybe the medieval and the modern layers, and this is called Chassidut. And I want to point it out because it's not the same as Kabbalah, but it is mystical. Okay, Chassidut is a whole movement, a mystical movement. Maybe we could call it like a popular piety movement within Judaism that started with a figure named the Baal Shem Tov in the 1700s, maybe even the late 1600s. And in a way, they were reacting against a lot of what Kabbalah teaches. But they borrowed ideas from Kabbalah and sort of reworked them into a popular piety movement. What does that mean? Basically, it took ownership of religious experience from the yeshivas, the religious schools, and put it right in the hands of like every grandma and baker and farmer and everyday ordinary person. You didn't have to be a rabbi, like spend all your day in the library studying to experience God. The Hasidim, okay, the people who created this whole genre of text called Hasidut, a Hasid is like a fervent person, a zealot. They find religious meaning and beauty in every act. Nothing is too mundane to connect to God. So the way you tie your shoes, the way you put on your clothes, the way you go to the bathroom, the way you wash your hands, what you think about when you see a flower for the first time in spring or a rainbow in the sky. Each of these things can have practices, meditation. You can connect with God through all of these ways. Singing, ecstatic dancing, poetry, music, all of these things became alternatives to sort of scholarly, rigorous academic study from the rabbis. Okay, so that kind of comes in between the period of Jewish mysticism and modern Jewish mysticism. And therefore, modern Jewish mysticism also owes a debt to the Hasidic movement. Okay. Any questions so far just about terminology? Like there's some different layers, historical periods, and concepts going on here. Any questions about these things before we move on to some history and stuff? Yeah, Tyler, uh, are you able to unmute yourself, or can I don't know if I.
Is this working?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't really a terminology question so much so as I'm wondering we defined like our time frame, but geographically in the world,
Mm.
where are we looking at the original versions of this tradition popping up?
Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. So most of this movement happens in Ashkenaz and Sephard, okay, like European Mediterranean Jewry. Okay, so we don't see as much, at least in the early periods, we don't see as much in like Iraqi Jewish community, Persian Jewish community in India, China, Northern Africa, not so much. But in the kind of Provence and in parts of Spain and in like Rhineland, it's called Ashkenaz. This is where these ideas really start to circulate. Okay, not uncontested, by the way. Not everybody was a fan of these ideas. There were all kinds of people who decried mysticism and said it's baloney. This is total superstition. You people are losing your minds. And it's not like everybody jumped on the Kabbalah wagon and started listening to Madonna. Okay, but this through that area, that geographical areas where these ideas began to circulate. Oh, Brother Mark, hello.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Uh, you said the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, um, became known, I guess, like in the Dark Ages or in the end of the Dark Ages. Was there any record of it existing or being known about prior to that time? Like around the turn of the century or in the old Jewish kingdom?
Hmm. Excellent question. So I'm going to be introducing some of these textual layers that developed through these different periods. And um, just to kind of point out, one of the earliest is this book. It's called Sefer HaBahir. Okay, Sefer HaBahir. This is one of the oldest, what we might call nowadays, Kabbalah. Okay, it's impenetrable. It's very difficult to understand. I don't really understand. It's quite a thing. Sefer HaBahir. It has, as I was mentioning, it's like kind of rather than being concerned with like my individual experience of God, knowledge of God's nature, it's more concerned with like magic and cosmology, angels, things like that. This is sort of the earliest layer and might be as old as 1800 years old, like second century, third century, maybe. Some people think it's older, but it's probably not. Okay, this is Sefer HaBahir. After that is Sefer Yetzirah. This gets into like the structure of the universe. It's a very core idea in Jewish mysticism and really impacts Freemasonry. It's the idea that there's a kind of logic or like a geometry to the universe, that God creates the world with a kind of a plan, like a mathematics, a divine calculus, if you will. And in Sefer Yetzirah, this is expressed in terms of like letters, that God uses the letters of the Hebrew alphabet to structure what we experience as reality. And this is sort of like a science of understanding that divine calculus. Sefer Yetzirah. It means like the book of creations. Yetzirah is like, yeah, formation like how God forms reality with letters. Um, Maybe I can read you just the first verse is kind of the most famous, and it really impressed Freemasons. And I won't say too much, but you can speculate. I'll just read in English. This is from just like, verse 1, chapter 1 of Sefer Yetzirah. With 32 mystical paths of wisdom engraved, God engraved, the Lord of hosts, Adonai Tzvaot, the God of Israel, the living God, King of the universe, El Shaddai, merciful and gracious, high and exalted, dwelling in eternity, whose name is holy, he is lofty and holy. He created his universe with 3 books. Okay, Sepharim. There's a word play going on here in Hebrew. Sepharim, or it could mean stories. With number, Sephar, and with communication, Sipur. So it's using this, samek, pei, resh verb root. You're just changing the vowels. You get 3 different words. One is for letters, numbers, and kind of consciousness, storytelling. Like God uses, why 32? It's the 22 letters of the alphabet, Hebrew alphabet, and the 10 sephirot. Okay, we'll learn about sephirot later this evening, like 10 divine modalities. God uses the 22 letters and the 10 sephirot to create reality through letters, numbers, and consciousness. Or some commentator, they say time, space, and consciousness. That's the fundamental build, like the dimensions of our reality. Wow, just in one, a couple of sentences. And that's what this whole book, it lays out, like how all of this works through letters, numbers, and stories, consciousness, narrative. That's Sefer Yetzirah. So this book, it's attributed to Abraham, but we know that historically it was probably not composed before the 3rd century CE. Some people contest that, of course, but that's sort of like where this is placed. Okay, so 1800 years ago, maybe about 1700 years ago. And then there are all kinds of other books as well, but 1300s in Spain, the Zohar. Okay, this is Sefer HaZohar, and this is my Zohar. It's in all these little volumes, so I can read it little by little in my pocket. There is a translation into English by Daniel Matt. It's a scholarly translation, so I recommend this one. It's and you can also, he does a weekly lesson. You can study with him. He's amazing. This is volume 1. There are 12 of these. And it took me studying this with the Aramaic 5 years to read just volume 1. It is hard stuff, but it is beautiful. It's poetry. It's mystery par excellence. And this is sort of the Zohar, the book of radiance. Sefer HaZohar, it emerged as a European work in this kind of weird Aramaic, written in Aramaic in the 1300s. Okay, so these texts go as far back as almost the turn of the millennium, 2,000 years ago, and they people continue to write works of Kabbalah today. Maybe Brother Christine.
Thank you. This is a wonderful introduction. Can you just very briefly, Bel Shem Tov, could you just give us a really brief understanding of what that is?
Oh, sure. So the Baal Shem Tov means like his name means, oh wait, can I, how do I do it to everybody? I'll write his name. He's a very, very important figure in Hasidic movement. Means the master of the divine name or master of the good name. Baal Shem Tov. So I think he lived in Poland, and he basically he mastered like all of the rabbinic teachings, the Talmud and Jewish law, works of Jewish law, legal codes, and philosophy. But he also there are all these stories about him performing miracles, using the divine name, and teaching people, like everyday, ordinary people, with these beautiful and very poignant parables, and thereby sort of reawakening a kind of passion for the divine through emotion, through song, and through meditation and mysticism. And he's kind of the father of the Hasidic movement. His grandson is Rabbi Nachman of Breslov from Ukraine. He's one of my favorite rabbis. I have a number of his books up here. He's very accessible. I would encourage anyone, if you're interested in Hasidic thought, to also look up Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. There are a lot of works translated into English of both of these figures. Okay? And they were alive at the time that Freemasonry was beginning to emerge and become popular in Europe. So there is, there is a high likelihood that their thinking and the movements that they really fomented really were an impact upon the emergence of Freemasonry in the British Isles, as a kind of Freemasonry as we know it, today. Brother Maya.
Thank you, Brother Casey. This is really interesting. I can see how Jesus of Nazareth must have been a Kabbalist, just from some of the things he was teaching. You can kind of see that woven into some of it too, being, the tradition he came up in. But my question is actually about another. I think he was also a Kabbalist, but my understanding is he took a really dark turn. I don't know if you know anything about, or you're going to mention anything about Sabbatai Zevi. And
It
because
wasn't.
he was around that same time, the late,
Yes.
17th century, early, and apparently some of his followers, like Jacob Frank, were instrumental in forming the early Illuminati. So
Yes.
it was like, anyway, if you're going to talk about him, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
I wasn't going to go down that rabbit hole.
I know. I'm
But
sorry. I didn't mean
no,
to like open that.
no,
And
no.
you can close it if you want
No,
to.
no, I won't fully close it, but I want to make sure, I don't know a lot about how his followers were connected to Freemasonry and like other like, Hermetic things and the Illuminati. I haven't studied deeply, but he is a major figure. Sabbatai Zevi, he basically was a messianic figure in the 1600s that like almost everyone believed in. Okay, like
Supposedly, like
he,
half the Jewish community in the world was under
yes,
his spell, which is
yes.
hard to even conceive of.
It's really inconceivable. And like major rabbis were like writing letters endorsing, like, yeah, this is finally the Messiah. But he kind of, the kind of like dark side was he believed that the way to repair the world, we're going to talk about this Kabbalistic notion of repairing the world. And this is it's kind of related to Freemasonry in a very deep way, our work as Freemasons. Um, he believed that the way to fix the world was to go into the problem, the forbidden, the sinful thing. And by sort of doing it, if it's done in the right way by him or by one of his followers or something, you could sort of induce a correction in that broken,
Purgative or something.
yes, and that it would bring about the
Liberation.
liberation of the universe. And so he was performing, profoundly
Dark
what
things.
we would call like antinomian actions, like publicly having sex, or things like this. So he was known for this. Then, his story kind of ends when he decides to try and go and convert the like pasha, the sultan of the Ottoman Empire. So he goes on this trek. You can kind of imagine what was this guy like. He goes to the Ottoman Empire and he like wants to see the sultan and tells him, "Hi, I'm the Messiah and you need to convert." And the sultan looks at this guy and he's like, how about this? You can convert to Islam, or I'm going to chop your head off. What would you, what do you pick? Okay. And he converted. He converted to Islam. And so, the majority of his followers were broken. Like, what happened? How could this be? That he wasn't really the Messiah, blah, blah, blah. It caused a horrible, disruption. And this is why the Hasidic movement started. Because the Hasidim, like the Baal Shem Tov, they pointed at Sabbatai Zevi and all of his followers and said, see, this is where Kabbalah gets you. Okay, it makes you crazy. So no more Kabbalah. We need kind of a mixture of intellectualism and mysticism, and that makes Hasidut. Some of his followers, they tried to make sense of it, as religious people tend to do. They said, this is the ultimate repair. By becoming a Muslim, he's sort of like reuniting all of the religions, and he's saving Islam from within, something weird like this. That was their justification. They continued to follow him. I believe there's even a small community today that is sort of the inheritor of that lineage. But anyway, Yes, that was a major impact on the evolution of Jewish mysticism and perhaps also on Freemasonry. Maybe Glenn, Brother Patrick, Travis, and then I'll move on to some other concepts, if that's okay.
Can you hear me on this thing?
Yes, I can.
Oh, it works. A couple of things. I'm hoping you'll talk about the Tanya later.
Sure, yes, I can. I will.
Cool. There's been a misconception on the Zohar.
Oh, speaking of Tanya, here we go. This is the Tanya we'll talk
Oh,
about.
good Lord.
Anyway, go on.
People have been misconstruing the Zohar, and they think it as a magical book when it is absolutely nothing but a further extension of a commentaries on Torah. If you try to dive into the Zohar without having a foundation in Torah, I'll let you finish that one.
You're going to get lost.
Yeah.
Yes.
My question though, the Hechalot material out of which Kabbalah came from, I was wondering if you'd run into differences. I'm Sephardic. My family came out of Spain and ended up in southern Russia.
Wow.
But there is a difference in the Hechalot approach between the Ashkenaz and the Sephardic. And it is out of this particular milieu that we've got so many different kinds of Kabbalah. And I think the Frankist movement, though, is important because the Golden Dawn and much of the Western Esoteric traditional form of Kabbalah it is rooted in the Frankist movement. So that's something that we need to be aware of. And it's sort of a change of Sabbatai Zevi's approach, if you will. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the difference between the Chelot, between the Sephardic and Ashkenazic, if it's within the purview of this particular meeting.
Well, this is a
Shelve
very
it for
good.
another one later or something, if you want to.
This is a very good question, but I have to say it's beyond my knowledge. I don't have a lot of access to Sephardic Kabbalah. I haven't studied deeply, and I don't want to misspeak in comparing. But what I will say just about the Hechalot literature, it's another important layer that I kind of skipped over. So there's a great website to all. I recommend all of you. It's called Sepharia. Oops. Sepharia. Oops. Yeah, Sepharia. It's kind of an online library, and it's the best thing that we have now. Many, many translations, not everything, but people are actively working to provide translations of all these texts I have mentioned and more, including the like Hechalot Rabati, all of these it's a whole genre of mystical texts that focus on the Hechalot, the kind of like chambers or palaces, divine palaces within the realm of God. And it's a kind of, there are manuals for like how to gain entry into God's presence through meditative absorption. And there are guardians at doors as you go in, and you need to know their names or have a special password in order to go through, or they will send you back, or they'll drive you insane, or they will do all kinds of things to you. And it's how to get in. And this is a kind of a theophany, like how can I either like unify with God? How can I meet God? How can I know God personally, experientially? It's a beautiful genre of mystical texts, kind of understudied compared to things like the Zohar. And speaking of which, I want to really echo Glenn's very important point that the Zohar is written as a Torah commentary, a mystical Torah commentary. So it's structured mostly giving commentary on the almost all of the 52, 54 parshiot of the Torah. The Torah is divided into weekly portions, and each section of the Zohar is focused on one of those portions. Some are very, very long, like the first one, Bereshit, first couple chapters, like hundreds of pages. So there's maybe several hundred pages just on the first like word of the Bible, Bereshit, or even the first letter. Why is it a bet instead of an aleph? And there's all kinds of beautiful things about this. So without reading the Torah and being like the writers of the Zohar presume that you, the reader, already are almost like intimately familiar with the Torah narrative, with its classical commentaries, and then also with the Talmud. Do you see this, encyclopedic thing up here? This is almost all of the Talmud, and basically it's a manual for how to think like a rabbi about every single topic in the world. And the characters in the Zohar are the rabbis from the Talmud. So the author of the Zohar also presumes that you've read this whole thing and know it intimately. And so without that, it's very easy to get lost or to think it's some kind of magical, mystical, talismanic manual or something, which it is not. So, if this is, and something similar, we could say something similar about Freemasonry. When somebody wishes to become a Freemason, we presume that you have prepared yourself to a certain extent. Maybe not all of us in the same way, but we have to come to the door of the temple of Freemasonry having prepared ourselves with, various, life experiences and studies and a certain basic morality, at least. Without these, Freemasonry will be misunderstood as some kind of magical, oh, you can control the world or you can know this, whatever. Or just a panoply of mystical minutia that really is actually useless. You have to be prepared in order to get into the mysteries of Freemasonry. And that's kind of why things like the Zohar or Freemasonry are sort of maybe concealed a little bit. Because without preparation and guidance, they could actually do more harm than good, more confusion than illumination. This is not to be like, oh, you can't access it or your head will explode. No, it's like in order for it to really do what it's supposed to do, there's a process. Okay? This is my opinion, at least. Brother Patrick. Good evening. Okay. That's a great question. I have one here. I thought someone might ask. There's actually two, depending on how deep you want to go. Something like this, okay, written by a respected figure in the field. This is Daniel Matt, okay, the same as the translator of the Zohar. He's a scholar of this stuff. And he, in this, accessible volume, he provides what he called the essential Kabbalah. So this can give you some basic concepts that can help introduce the kind of Kabbalistic worldview and conception of the divine. There are quotations and things, but it's not like Hebrew or Aramaic heavy. It's very accessible. This is a good intro. Okay. Another author is Arthur Green. He has a number of books like this. And together with Daniel Matt, Art Green is one of the best for English language introductions. In fact, I think he wrote the introduction to Daniel Matt's Zohar. Now, if you want to go a little deeper, okay, and and maybe it's not a little deeper, it's like a lot deeper, but a good introduction before you get to Zohar is this book. Okay, it's called Sha'arei Orah, Gates of Light. This book, this is the first text where the idea of sephiroth as sephiroth begins to appear by Joseph Jikatilla. The Zohar does not speak of like an Elan, a tree with these sephiroth. That really was articulated first in this book. And this book treats each sephirah, each kind of like divine modality, in one chapter and explores the mystical attitude that is associated with each of these modalities. And it's referring you to the Torah and also to certain rabbinical and Talmudic ideas. So this not only walks you through the sort of like map of the divine tree, the tree of life, as we call it. It also really serves to connect that, root it very firmly in rabbinic Judaism, which is the intention. Mysticism is meant to help you connect to God. And this book is a really like deep, fulsome introduction to that whole Sephira system. This is the classical text, and it is translated into English. Now, this is much more advanced than this one, but if you're ready for that, I would say before going to Zohar, this one. Okay, that's my recommendation. The simple answer is no, not at all. I think, I'm going to get a little bit to some history momentarily, and there are history books written about this that can serve to introduce you. Studying these texts is a whole different beast, and the Tanya is its own Hasidic commentarial system, philosophical system of just one Hasidic lineage. And it may or may not work for you. As you can see, it's humongous, okay? So, and there are commentaries written on that. So you could spend years and years reading so many books and never become a Freemason if you're just worried about, let me prepare by reading all these books. Don't do that. You'll die first before you actually get anywhere. So yeah, it's not necessary. That's beautiful. Couldn't say it better myself. That's very beautiful. And I think, yes, that is how the Kabbalists think of the letters. This book I think is also really, I think it's quite beautiful. Some people are drawn to different texts. I'm particularly drawn to this one. And I think the early Freemasons, who were kind of mystically inclined, Freemasonry is not monolithic, I have to say. There are different Masonic cultures, different Masonic orders. There's our own Universal Co-Masonry, which is egalitarian, admits people of any gender. And then there are, like male-only orders, women-only orders. And some of them may have different cultures, like they focus on charity or different social type of justice, all kind of different things. And this has always been the case, even in early Freemasonry. It's not like the Freemasons in the 1600s, 1700s, or earlier were like more pious, mystical than we are today, and that there's been a decline. We have diaries of Masons in the 1700s complaining about the same things that Masons complain about today. These people are not serious enough. They're no good at the rituals. These people only like to drink and they don't come for anything serious. They just want to eat with their friends. That's always been the case. And also, there have always been Freemasons who were drawn to books and mysteries and esotericism more than these other, aspects, which is not to say they're not important. So you may find that one of these mystical texts, or even another mystical system within the Western esoteric tradition, calls to you. And I would say just use that as a kind of vehicle to explore and grow. Sefer Yetzirah is quite beautiful. It's quite concise. This is mostly commentary. The text is really like only a few pages, and it's quite it's thought provoking, and that's why I like it. So I highly recommend Sefer Yetzirah. So maybe just if I can, in the interest of time, just Travis, I'll get to you. Please don't, the rest of you, please don't put your hands down if you have burning questions. Let's just I want to give a little more context to connect Kabbalah and Freemasonry historically, and then we'll do more questions, okay? So I beg your forbearance. Travis, did you have a question?
Yes, actually, I do. I have been having, this is the reason why I'm here. I've been having visions of golden orbs that are floating over top of the Giza pyramids. The core of the construction is made of a Merkabah, which is said to be the key, the chariot to the throne of God, and amongst other things. There's one over top of each pyramid, that are floating over top of the Giza pyramids. There's one orb at the corner, each corner of the Bermuda Triangle, and an interdimensional gate there at the base of the Bermuda Triangle. These structures are made of magnetics and mercury microgold, in which this is what right here, if you can see it. I can send it to you if you'd like. That's the Bermuda Triangle in my research. I have also what I found in my research is that the energy forming over top of the Giza pyramids are actually the seraphim and cherubim angels in Revelations and in the Bible. I went to the White House here in the United States about my visions, and I told them about it. And then 10 months later, China finds plasma bubbles forming over top of the Giza pyramids, in which me and AI had a conversation over it, and we both agree that it's spiritual energy forming over top of the Giza pyramids. And I'm really
sorry to interrupt, Travis. Sorry. So I just in the interest of time, I don't want to cut you off. Maybe this is your intimate personal experiences. I would love to maybe offline we could talk some more, because it does look like some of the imagery and the symbols that you are referring to in your vision, they are derived from different imagery, symbolism, concepts that are related to Kabbalah. And perhaps we could unpack them offline together sometime. Maybe let's get in touch about that. But so I'm sorry I don't mean to cut you off, but just in the interest of time, I'll move on to some historical information, if that's okay with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, yeah, let's see. moving towards like kind of some of the concepts and values and worldview of Freemasonry to kind of start to see like to bridge this connection. First, I just want to point out some like maybe concerns of Kabbalah that became interesting questions for European non-Jewish European mystics and Hermeticists later on, and including Freemasons, and also some like styles of studying Kabbalah. Okay, so the Kabbalistic texts, Jewish mystical texts, talk about different kinds of secrets. One family or constellation of secrets is secrets related to the creation of reality. These are called the Ma'aseh Bereshit, the works of creation. So many Jewish mystical texts, they deal with the how does God create the world? And for, Sefer Yetzirah is one of those kind of example, okay? Ma'aseh Bereshit. Another set of secrets, a family of, concerns and texts is Ma'aseh Merkava. Travis just used this word, Merkava. It's the divine chariot. This is the chariot that appears in Ezekiel's vision, Ezekiel chapter 1, a very famous vision. You can go and read it offline. This became especially for Ezekiel, he lived at the time right after the destruction of the first temple. So for him and many mystics after him, if the temple of God, the dwelling place of God, has been destroyed, well, where is God now? His house is gone. And, his vision and these, Maaseh Merkava sort of related texts and ideas, they conceive that God actually exists in kind of like a portable shrine, movable chariot that can come to you or can go anywhere. And so they're like secret. Well, how does the chariot work? What's holding it up? There are these different beings and creatures like the seraphim that Travis mentioned, also seraphim, and the structure of the divine realm as well. So this also is a kind of one of the concerns of God, of Jewish mysticism. Another concern is dveikut. It's like how does it feel to become one with God, or at least to feel the urge to want closeness with God, is the urge of dveikut. So how can I elicit this feeling or induce this feeling to arise inside of me and drive me to seek out, to return to the divine? How can my soul kind of reascend to its source, the creator? And finally, maybe how is the divine weakened or broken and healed is a major concern in Jewish mysticism. So, it's kind of an attempt to explain why there is evil in the world, why there is brokenness. The Zohar uses this wild, metaphor that basically God got a divorce with itself, that there's a kind of a prince and princess, or like king and queen, and they separated. How did they separate? Through our sin, through our own, damaging the world, through our murdering and our stealing and our raping and our intellectual, misguidance, our idolatry of things. This caused this kind of separation between, the different modalities of God, and that it's our responsibility to reunite them, to induce them to be reunited. And this is called making a repair in the world, tikkun, repairing the world, tikkun olam, or even like the word shvira. So we're trying to reunite. And this causes a flow of divine abundance, shefa, flow into our universe, reanimating, recreating, uplifting both humanity and the divine. Okay, so we and the divine need to work together. These are sort of the four main concerns, if I may generalize, of Kabbalah. Freemasonry, I think, the early Freemasons were influenced by Christian mystics, Hermeticists, Rosicrucians, and others who saw these themes and kind of re-articulated them. So, trying to understand the divine geometry of our world, both as kind of like a plan for the world, but also seeing like the logos, the logic that's written into our reality. The Kabbalist and the Freemason, I think, assume that it is knowable to human beings through introspection, through ritual, through all kinds of different, through study of the natural world, and like through the arts and sciences, we can come to know this tremendous wisdom and strength and beauty that's woven into our reality. Now, the Ma'aseh Merkava, kind of like the divine chariot, is this idea of like, how can we find God? Freemasonry also is concerned with this question, like, what is the divine? What is humanity? What are the connections between us? How can I aspire to the divine? This is a central question taken up by Freemasonry. And in terms of Dveikut, perhaps not in terms of like religious devotionalism, which Freemasonry also presumes that you already have that. Okay? Some people, I think, come to Freemasonry thinking it's going to replace their religion. They feel that their religion is deficient in one way or another. I don't like this aspect. I don't like that aspect. I don't like my priest. The lunch is no good in my synagogue. So I'll become a Freemason and it'll be much better. And I don't have to concern myself with my inherited tradition. I'm afraid to say you may find yourself disappointed. Freemasonry kind of presumes that you are already aspiring in your, maybe we could call it your exoteric identity. And Freemasonry is supplementing that with an esoteric modality. So whatever your tradition may be, in my opinion, this is not like a requirement. They're never going to ask you if you're applying to become a Freemason or something that, are you a regular church goer or masjid, you pray 5 times a day, something like this? No. But we do ask, do you at least believe in something? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in a higher power? If you don't, there's no point in doing Freemasonry, in trying to learn about it. It's a waste of your time and our time, because why would we spend all the time training you, initiating you, doing all this stuff? It's useless. So Freemasonry is not concerned with Dveikut in the terms of teaching you some specific religious devotionalism. You should already have that. And that's the kind of core impetus, motivation for your aspiration as a Freemason, both for yourself and for all of humanity. Okay? And finally, the idea of like repairing the world, working to bring peace, harmony, stability, justice, balance into the world, and that I take agency for that. I assume agency for that. This is very much, very much, a part of Freemasonry's self-articulated purpose, sense of purpose. Okay, so we don't need to talk about that. Okay. So I want to start to kind of link together this like all of these Jewish mystical texts and Freemasonry. How did that happen? And how did these ideas become so influential and inspiring for the people who sort of framed what we think of as modern Freemasonry? So if we think about the first Christians to become exposed to Kabbalistic ideas, mystical ideas, this happened in Italy in the 1300s and 1400s. So Pico della Mirandola was one of the early figures in this kind of camp. Oh, and by the way, sorry to go on so many tangents, but this isn't just one little trajectory. Like there was Jewish mysticism and then Christians learned about it. It's much more messy and interesting than that. So the Jewish mystics were learning from their Muslim mystic brothers and sisters around them in Northern Africa and got a lot of ideas and inspirations from Muslim mystics, Sufis, okay, and thought, wow, this is good. How can I adapt this, or articulate my own tradition in similar ways? This happened, like in Alexandria, in Egypt. It's known to have happened. In Turkey, in Iraq, in Iran, many places there was this type of cross-pollination. And also probably from Christianity, certain ideas about kind of like the divine mother, like Marian devotionalism and stuff, definitely had an influence on Jewish mysticism. So please do not let me give you this mistaken image that there's like this pure lineage coming from Judaism and just going in one direction. It's much more interesting and messy than that. But we don't have a lot of time, so I won't go down that rabbit hole. So Pico della Mirandola, he became interested, as like during the Renaissance. People were discovering or rediscovering all kinds of ideas. There was a renewed interest in, Aristotle, Plato, Greek philosophy, because Muslims had preserved those Greek texts in Arabic translation, while the Romans and other empires destroyed and burned all of that stuff. The Muslim scholars preserved it, and the translations of those Arabic texts started to reach, they were translated back into Latin for the first time during the Renaissance. So there's a rebirth, like, oh my God, science, data, this beautiful, wow, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, all of these things that the Greeks had sort of, began to experiment with, and the Muslims had preserved and then developed into like algebra, calculus, all of these things, while Europe was in the Dark Ages, living in holes and muddy, dirty, whatever, was starting to make its way back to the Mediterranean. And this led to the Renaissance, the rebirth of knowledge. And so, this encouraged, or this included translations of Hebrew texts and Aramaic texts. And so Italians and French and others, they started to sort of discover for the first time Egyptian religion, Greco-Roman mystery religions, described in those like retranslated Greek texts, and also Kabbalah. And Kabbalah was probably most appealing to people like Pico della Mirandola and Reuchlin and all these other figures, because they saw it as sort of being close to Christianity. For better or for worse, Christianity sees itself as, it's like a daughter religion of Judaism. Now, the internal Christian understandings of Judaism tend to be largely misunderstandings of Judaism, like Jews are sort of just characters in Christian narrative and theology, and that also needs unpacking and exploration. But for better or for worse, that means that there's this sense that Kabbalah is sort of connected to Christianity in some way. And so it piqued some interest in Italy. After Pico della Mirandola, there were a number of other like priests and aristocrats who would hire rabbis to teach them Hebrew and Aramaic and to study Jewish mystical texts together with them. And then those thinkers started writing their own Kabbalah books, Kabbalah with either a Q or a C, sort of adapting the language and some of the mystical concepts or worldview of Kabbalah and adapting it to Christianity. So for example, one of the sephiroth, the one that's closest to us, is the presence of God. It's called the Shekhinah. So that's really the only thing that we can experience in our meat body, our human body, is the presence of God. The kind of it's the immanent divine. Some Jewish mystics, they consider Shekhinah, it's synonymous with the Jewish peoplehood in a way. Others see it as kind of above our reality. Some see it as the world itself, like, oh, where is Shekhinah? This is Shekhinah, and this is Shekhinah, and you are Shekhinah. Everything is sort of a manifestation, a concretization of the divine presence. There are theological debates about this. But in any case, Christian mystics, they looked at this language of the Shekhinah, the presence of God, and they said, that's the church. So Shekhinah, we're just going to interpret that. Whenever we see Shekhinah, we're going to say what that's really talking about in this Jewish mystical text from 700 years ago or whatever. That means the church, the body of Christ. Okay? And instead of Tiferet, the kind of husband, the partner of Shekhinah, that's Christ, that's Jesus, instead of Yod He Vav He. So it was like we're going to adapt and maybe it's in an uncharitable way, we could say it's a bastardization of the original ideas, but who cares? That became a new thing. It's its own mystical tradition now. And they started writing books and it became very popular. And guess who was reading these books? The early founders of Freemasonry in France and continental Europe and the British Isles. So who are some of the, just to give you a couple of names of these very interesting, sometimes controversial people. So there's Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from each of these people. So, and you can taste whether you like this or not, but Mirandola said, quote, "Every Hebrew Kabbalist following the principles and sayings of the science of the Kabbalah is inevitably forced to concede, without addition, omission, or variation, precisely that the Catholic faith of Christians maintains concerning the Trinity and every divine person, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." So basically he's saying, it's kind of hard to understand, but basically what he's saying is that the secrets of the Kabbalah are actually Christian secrets, and that if you really understand them properly, basically in the way he's reading them, then you'd be a Catholic. You would understand the Trinity. So he saw in the Kabbalah Christian ideas and began to produce his own commentaries based on that. Johannes Reuchlin, who lived, his life overlaps with Pico della Mirandola. It's like 15th century, 16th century. So he writes, this is another kind of very problematic quote, but I do want to tell it to you. He writes, I am aware of the deplorable plight of the Jews in our own time. They have been expelled not only from Spain, but also from the borders of our Germany, forced to find homes for themselves elsewhere, and even to emigrate to the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, we can expect that the Hebrew language, along with a great loss of holy scriptures, will disappear and vanish from our midst. So he's like, well, Reuchlin's perspective was, we like the Jewish mystical books, but the Jews themselves, we can do without them. So he was what we would call an anti-Semite today. He very deeply appreciated many of the Kabbalistic ideas and began to manipulate them into a kind of Christian mysticism. But he thought that, really, it's Christians' responsibility to take these texts and preserve them, because eventually the Jews, they don't know what to do with them, and they're going to be wiped out eventually anyway. Now, contemporary with Reuchlin was a man named Johannes Pfefferkorn, and he's maybe the most unsavory of the bunch. He writes in his book Mirror of the Jews, this is from 1507, he wrote, "Take the path of books away from them. Burn the books. Then it will be that much easier to bring them to the path of truth." So his approach, like many after him, was the Jews are still Jews and not Christians because they've got all these books, like the Talmud. Why are they reading Talmud? They should be reading the Bible. Burn the Talmud, burn the Kabbalah, burn all their books, and then they will become Christians. So it was almost like save the Jew but destroy Judaism was his perspective. Reuchlin explicitly, there are letters and correspondence and essays by both of them. Reuchlin disagreed. He writes in a very famous book, you might come across it as you explore Hermeticism and Kabbalah and Freemasonry. It's called De Arte Kabbalistica. And in my opinion, this is not a Kabbalah book. It's a polemic. And so I would warn you to be careful as you read, or at least critical as you read it. It's interesting historically, but it's maybe not a good source for information about Kabbalah. But in it, Reuchlin writes, basically, keep the books, don't burn the books, but get rid of the people. It was the opposite. Burn the Jews, but keep their books, okay? So you can see that Kabbalah was really kind of in the middle of a lot of different, political, economic, all kinds of struggles over knowledge, mystical knowledge and otherwise, in the, early modern, late Renaissance and early modern period. And so as we come to Freemasonry and Kabbalah, we should know that that is a big part of the inherited context for the interaction between Freemasons or non-Jews and Kabbalah. It's not always pretty, is what I want to say. Okay. So there are others, Cardinal Giles of Viterbo, who actually learned Aramaic. All kinds of interesting people to look into. I leave it to your curiosity. But basically, through these early figures, Pico della Mirandola, Johannes Reuchlin, Johannes Pfefferkorn, they popularized Kabbalah in German, in Latin. They were the first ones to publish the Zohar and other Kabbalistic mystical books with a printing press. And then Jews were like, oh, well, you know what? The secret's out. They're publishing it. We might as well start publishing. So they began publishing the Zohar and other mystical texts. Christians published it first. And it's because of that early publishing effort that these texts and the ideas they contain circulated through continental Europe and the British Isles. And they found a very fertile ground in the, what we might call they call themselves like liberal thinkers, free thinkers of the Enlightenment, who were seeking new ways for thinking about God, new ways for thinking about society, and other kind of, maybe we could call them just humanities subjects today, like economics, sociology, anthropology, history, in light of new discoveries garnered from the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. Their minds were open to these sort of mystical abstractions about religion. Kabbalah, one of the core premises of Kabbalah is the Bible, scripture, must not be read literally. That's the stupidest thing you could do. It must be read and understand allegorically. It's mysterious. It has layers of meaning, at least four. In some of my other talks, my brothers will know, we talk about the pardes, this paradigm that there's a superficial layer, the peshat layer of a text, and there's the remez, kind of like maybe like secret, kind of hidden layer. Then there's the drash layer. It's like a homiletical. You start making something up based on what occurs to you. And then there's sod, that first word we learned today, the secret layer, hidden, completely mysterious. This is the sort of hermeneutic of reading Jewish texts. There are layers, and that the literal meaning is sort of like the most superficial and not useless, but it's not the whole picture. And this idea was very, very important for these Enlightenment era thinkers who were wrestling with the question of, if my book doesn't make sense in light of science and empiricism, what does my religion mean anymore? So they turned to various sources of mysticism, and Freemasonry was born from, modern Freemasonry was born from that exploration, partially into Kabbalah, the secrets of Kabbalah. So before we close, maybe with some questions or discussion, I just want to point out a couple of books for you. These are English, I'm guessing you probably read in English. So I mentioned the Bahir and Sefer Yetzirah. These are sort of early mystical texts, not Kabbalah proper yet. Okay, they don't call themselves Kabbalah, but they are mystical texts. Okay, then we get to, then we come to the Zohar. Okay, 13th century Spain is written, probably by someone, Moses Cordovero. It says it's by other authors, but it emerged in 1300s. Okay. Then there are sort of like commentary, like this kicks off this very fruitful time of like mystical writing and essays and books. So I mentioned Sha'arei Ora, Gates of Light by Joseph Gicatilla. This is one of my personal favorites. Then this is a great, it's kind of hard to read again, but it's a good English book and it's short. This is Moshe Cordovero, and this is his introduction to Kabbalah. It's called Or Ne'erav. Okay? This is quite accessible. And then if you're looking for like scholarly treatments, like introductions, overviews, things like that, there are books like this by Daniel Matt, The Essential Kabbalah. If you're looking in general, this book is quite new by Moshe Halbertal. It's called Concealment and Revelation, Esotericism in Jewish thought and its philosophical implications. This is yeah, quite good. Okay. And then if you really want something spicy, then another little known text that recently was translated. This is the Idra Rabbah, another text. It's called it's a section of the Zohar, or a kind of like a add-on. Really, this is really a kind of advanced and ponderous stuff. But this is sort of getting into the complexities that fascinated some of the Hasidic thinkers, or like Luria and other Kabbalists. But this is available. So Seekers of the Face, very interesting book. And that's probably plenty to keep you occupied until next month's Masonic seminar series. But for now, I'd like to, I don't want to go too much over time. Please feel free if you want to excuse yourself, no problem at all. But if you want to stick around, I'm happy to stay and answer a few questions for a little bit if you'd like. So thank you for listening today. So maybe we could go back to Paolo and Brother Maya. I'm sorry for getting to you so late, but please.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm from Portugal, and I think Sephardites are the Portuguese Jews. Portuguese in Spain are almost the same. Are not the same, but almost the same. And I never read the Kabbalah, but we have books from Kabbalah here in Portugal. I don't buy it because many people said I have to read the books I have in my house. Then later I buy more books.
Huh.
But I try to ask you one question because I think I have also Jewish blood, because the Portuguese are a mix of many people from many regions, from Africa, from Europeans, and also the names from my grandmother, all because the Jews have to change the name. What happens with the Inquisitions in Portugal and Spain is also with the Jews. Is also one of the most philosophers from Holland, they call Spinoza. I don't know
Yes,
if
I
you
love Spinoza.
Is Portuguese family. You have problems because I live also in Holland. Holland is the first European country that have respect for all the religions. They have a different kind of mentality. But the question I like to ask you is because for me, religions are geography. I'm geographer, and time to time, in time scales and historical place, becoming a prophet, a person that have some kind of enlightenment to try to give message to that region. Is why we have Buddhism, we have Hinduism, we have Taoism, we have Confucianism, Asia is another thing. Here in our society, we have the Abrahamic religion. Yeah, is the Jewish, we have the Christian, and we have the Islam. Christian is made by the Roman Empire, is not by Israel. That is also a political message. Is religion is how you connect to God, and of course, sometimes religion are also a political program for all the people.
Sorry,
living good, living
what's
good.
your
Okay,
question?
sorry.
No.
Sorry, because I know the Jews are very good in science, history. Also in Portugal, people are very good in the economy, and I think we are not better because we are Occidental or we are Jewish or we are American. I think the people, if they have the possibility of have this education, they could have the same possibility of growing up in a society. The question is, I like to ask you, is about what do you think, because we have different kinds of levels in the world, in the planet, also by equal gender, because just like the Co-Masonry, they have the same possibility for men and
Sorry,
women.
could you put your question just in like
Okay,
one sentence?
right.
Sorry, there are other people too, so I
Two,
just want to ask.
two questions.
Yeah.
Is one is what do you think about reincarnation?
Okay.
Because if you are born now in some parts of Asia or in some parts of Africa or wherever, you don't have the same possibility of growing up in some things. Also, if you are a
Okay.
woman, you know.
So number
What
one is reincarnation, and
Yes,
your other question?
the question is how the Jews thinking about the reincarnation, and
Sure.
why the people are born in some place they are suffer more, and others have a better life.
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
is
Okay, so this is a good question. So in Kabbalah, there is a conception of reincarnation. It's called Gilgal, going around and around. It's very similar to Sanskrit word samsara, which means going around and around. And yeah, there's the notion that it's not monolithic. So different thinkers have kind of explained this in different ways, how like the mechanics of the reincarnation. But yes, this is a Jewish idea that a soul may return to the world many, 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 many times until it attains union with the divine, or maybe it keeps reincarnating and just until the world is over. There are all kinds of different theories and stories about how that works, but we do find that idea in Jewish texts, not even just only mystical texts. That is kind of like a almost mainstream idea. Judaism, however, is really not so concerned with afterlife, so that's why like nobody really cares. Judaism is really mostly concerned with this life and this world, how to live in it. So that there are like speculations, but people don't spend a lot of time articulating them. But yeah, that's maybe all I could say about that. So yeah, thank you. Brother Maya?
Brother Ava hasn't had a chance to speak at all yet, so why don't you ask her if she'd
That's
like?
very kind. Okay, yes, thank you. Ava, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I'm not a Mason yet, so I wouldn't be considered brother, but thank you so much. I'm curious about, in terms of the rituals of Masonry, how would that not be like a Avodah? How would we?
Okay, it's a great question. So avodah zarah it basically means idolatry. It's like strange worship, foreign worship in Hebrew. There's an entire tractate of the Talmud explaining avodah zarah. There are three cardinal sins in Judaism, rabbinic Judaism: murdering, raping, and avodah zarah. These are the three no-nos. The rabbis taught if it comes down to your life, you can break any other rule. Every rule, you should break it to stay alive, except for those three. Okay, so that's kind of the severity with which the rabbis treat murder of another human being, rape, a violation of another human being sexually, and avodah zarah, like idolatry, whatever that has a kind of wide interpretation. How is Freemasonry not avodah zarah? Simple. What we do in a Masonic ritual does not involve the worship of anything. It is not a devotional ritual. Um, it God is a part of it, but each Freemason is allowed to conceive of the divine according to uh, their heart, their identity. No, dogmatic, compulsion is made on how you should pray to God or conceive of God, and no prohibited act of worship takes place in a Masonic ceremony. So personally, I feel perfectly comfortable as a Jew participating in Masonic ceremony, and I know many, many, many other Jews, both in our order and in what we call the Mailcraft, who are, some of them are far more observant than I am, and they are very active in their lodges. Did you have a follow-up clarification?
Yeah, well, it's sort of related, yeah, to being like
Sure.
Jewish in a lodge. I know a lot of sort of higher degrees are things like Knights Templar, or, sort of all this kind of crusader imagery, and obviously that's not very good for Jews. So how do you sort of coexist with something like that? Or, when
Ah,
considering your advancement, like how do you think of like, oh, maybe I don't go that way, like, or have be
sure,
friends with people who did, like, how do you
sure,
do
sure.
that?
That's a very good question. I'm not at liberty to go into detail about the higher degrees. However, uh, there is no, so in Mailcraft Freemasonry, there are orders that style themselves as Knights Templar. There is a debate within the Mailcraft orders whether that counts as Freemasonry at all, specifically for the issue you are raising. Freemasonry, one of the fundamental tenets of Freemasonry is that there should be no religious test for who may or may not be a Freemason, only that you believe in something. So the Knights Templar degrees in the kind of structure of Mailcraft Freemasonry, not in our order, in Universal Co-Masonry, let me be clear, not in our order, but in kind of North American Mailcraft Freemasonry, after a person becomes a Master Mason, they may proceed through several other orders. They need to complete what is called the York Rite and the Cryptic Rite. It's a system of like, depending on which state you're in, maybe 7 different degree ceremonies. After that time, if you are a baptized Trinitarian Christian, you may petition for membership as a Knights Templar. Okay? They don't accept Jews. They don't accept Muslims. Okay, so you can see that's a problem. Okay, now that order started in, I believe, New York State in like the 1870s or something. So it's kind of a baby. It's quite new. And it is not the Masonic trajectory that everyone takes at all, especially nowadays. It's a kind of a smaller order. Yeah, so that is kind of a problem perhaps for the male North America. It's also is a kind of a North American thing, but that might be a problem that the North American male Masonic culture needs to wrangle with. We don't have that type of concern in Universal Co-Masonry. Mhm. Oh, Ava, did you have a final question or point? And then I'll move on.
Yeah, comment. I do just want to say, well, is it okay? I not as a Mason, but I visited a Masonic hall in England, the historic Bath hall, which is a beautiful place. I think it is Mailcraft. And they did have a Knights Templar order. Now, obviously, I didn't get to see the members, but they showed me like the ritual space.
Yes.
So it doesn't seem like that's only a North American thing. It's at the very least has gone to England, which is,
Yes,
where the Universal Grand Lodge is. Um,
it's a North American creation that, for a variety of interesting reasons, kind of made its way to Europe. There's a kind of, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a kind of romantic fascination with the Knights Templar. It was like this re-emerging notion of chivalry and Christian nationalism is a little scary kind of stuff. But yes, it did get quite popular. It did have many members. It did cross the Atlantic. And nowadays, I'm not an anthropologist of Freemasonry. I am a scholar of religion, but I do know there are anthropologists of Freemasonry who are studying kind of this re-emergence of Knights Templar imagery and stuff in Masonic and Hermetic circles, and there's a kind of a troubling alignment with white supremacy movements and things like that. It's a little concerning, and scholars of religion are not only studying it from the outside, but people have even tried to infiltrate and study, like for public safety issues, like trying to find out what's going on there. So yeah, that's a kind of an emerging, ongoing phenomenon. Yeah, but I do want to distance universal co-masonry from that. That is not part of our system and our culture. Brother Maya?
I'll just keep it brief. I was just thinking about the Sefer Yetzirah and thinking how it reminded me of the stanzas of Dion in the Secret Doctrine, which to me is almost like the root text that all of these kinds of texts seem to have come from, these cosmological texts in Buddhism and Hinduism. It sounds like in Judaism as well. This idea of, where did God come from? Where are we going to? What's the whole point of this creation thing,
Mm.
So that was just an observation. Have you ever read the stanzas of Dion? It's the first section of the Secret Doctrine. And it's supposed to be the oldest spiritual texts on the planet.
Mm.
Anyway, thought I'd just...
Well, that's an interesting question. My understanding is that the text is that appears in the Secret Doctrine is a channeled text. So there is no evidence for it outside, that predates the 1800s and Madame Blavatsky. So we have no data that confirms its existence or its purported antiquity. Therefore, it is taken to be the product of like 1800s Europe, continental Europe, and its particular spiritual, economic, social concerns, just like the rest of theosophy. One of those concerns is an attempt to project the values that were being articulated by Blavatsky and kind of her circle, to project them deep into the past in order to stake a claim that this wisdom is the true understanding of all of humanity's religious traditions. And that by kind of getting all on the same page about all of the various religious traditions of humanity, that we would be able to resolve some of the diversity and inequality and variety that was becoming known, like popularly known, in Europe, mainly through colonial encounters. So this is how scholars understand the emergence of these texts today, that there is a reason why that idea became thinkable, and probably it's very likely that it's going in the opposite direction, that Blavatsky wrote these ideas, and it sounds like all these other texts that you mentioned, because she read and was exposed to all of the ideas in those texts, and then stewed them up, crystallized them into her secret doctrine, and expressed them in the voice of this an ancient sage I'm channeling and delivering this clarified, crystallized, clear message to humanity, and kind of giving it to the world in this way. It's a quite beautiful premise, right? That she, that her aspiration, her vision for the kind of unity of all religion. It's a mystical vision. However, we should. It's one thing to understand the context for the emergence of a text like this one, and it's another thing to accept it uncritically. And it doesn't mean we have to, disrespect it or disregard it or anything like that. I think as an educated person, we can. This Aristotle, it's one of my favorite quotes. He said, "It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." So we can understand. Okay, this is one way of understanding the diversity of mystical expressions throughout history. Nowadays, we understand history and sociology and anthropology in a different way. We use data and empiricism to establish fact, and we have kind of better ways of understanding history and diversity and variety and all that stuff. But that doesn't mean we have to disparage, Theosophy or Madame Blavatsky or the text that she produced. It's a monumental work of human spiritual literature. That has influenced all kinds of things, including universal co-masonry. So we can understand it, and we also don't have to shy away from the reality of its historical emergence. It doesn't have to scare us, I mean. And any other, I know we're quite over time. I appreciate your patience in listening to my very long talking. But yeah, Brother Christine, and then maybe we can wrap it up.
Thank you. I was going to ask this earlier, and I changed my question because I didn't know that it fit in. But you had mentioned that one of the things about these writings, about why they question everything in the readings, was about petitioning God. And I was really curious about that aspect. Like, what does that mean for a Jew, and what does that entail? I mean, without like explaining it, how somebody would do it, but like, what is the premise behind petitioning God? Because to me, I guess I think the opposite, that God gives so much good things. Like, how could I ask him for anything more, because he gives so much, you know what I mean? So I was curious about.
That's a beautiful question. And it's important, and not only for Jews, but if anyone who is faithful and prays to God might think about this. Why am I doing this? If God knows everything, he already knows what I'm asking for, and whether I need it. That's an interesting kind of theological question, right? Moses, Maimonides, the Rambam, one of the most famous Jewish philosophers, and many of his intellectual heirs, basically said, God doesn't need our prayers. Those prayers are for us, okay? In a number of different ways. It's a chance for you to articulate the things that are on your heart. Okay? It's kind of important for me to be able to think of God as a being who can listen to me, even though I might know that God is absolutely not a person. It's some kind of abstract ultimate reality, like beyond personhood. But maybe it's good I can think of God in that way. And that's one of God's modalities. Hence all of these different modalities, like the sephiroth and stuff. Sometimes God is sort of like a listener. So the prayers are a chance for me to articulate my needs, unburden myself, and it can kind of become very mystical and romantic. You can work yourself into an ecstasy of, begging and listen to me, like a parent or a lover even. That has therapeutic utility, psychological utility. It can be good to do this. Okay. The other reason that some Jewish thinkers say we do these prayers, and by prayer in Jewish liturgy it means the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei. It's a set of it means 18, but they're actually 19. Go figure. Set things that you ask for, kind of petition God for, 3 times a day. And some thinkers, myself included, by doing this 3 times a day, it kind of forces you to think of others. And by reading a set text, you're sort of talking to yourself when you're praying. And if you listen to the words in the liturgy, like, oh God, you gave me the capacity to think. I have rational faculty. Thank you. Blessed are you, God, for giving me the ability to think. Then it starts to shift your day a little bit. If you're listening to yourself as you're saying the prayers. Thank you. There's one for going to the bathroom. This is not in the Shemona Esrei, but there's, Asher Yatzar, Asher Yatzar et Hadam B'da'at Umlamed Lehonosh. It's like, God, thank you for creating human beings with like openings inside. And, let all of the little openings be open. If anything was open that shouldn't be open, or something that's closed that should be open, then I will die. I won't be able to be here. So, thank you for creating me with such wisdom and beauty. You like think about your embodiment. So you're talking to yourself. So it's not, the prayers, they conclude with a bracha in Judaism. It's not, oh God, please just do this. It's bless you who has given me this. Thank you for creating wine. Thank you for creating bread. Thank you for creating the rainbow. Blessed are you. That's kind of the prayer. And so you're talking to yourself, like eliciting gratitude and, rooted in this moment. So maybe that's a different way of thinking about petitionary prayer in Judaism. Okay, so I have talked so much, too much. It's a very unmystical thing to do. It's too many words, but thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I wish you all the best in your journey and your search. And I hope to see you at one of these, or perhaps someday in a Masonic lodge. Take care and be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.